Kırım işgalini tanımadıklarına ve hiç zaman tanımayacaklarına ve bu toprakını işgalden kurtarmak için elinden geleni yapacakları bizim için, Ukrayna devleti için ve ayrıca Kırım Tatarları için çok önemlidir. Ben 1944 yılında halkın topyekun sömürülüğüne ve soykırımına uğratılan ve ardından 20. yüzyılın en acımasız rejimlerin birine karşı vatanlarına kayıtıp gelmek ve insan hakları için neredeyse yarım asır devir bir içerisinde kuruşken Kırım Tatar neslinin az sayıda da hayatta kalan temsilcilerinden birisiyim. Büyük kıyınlıkları yenip bizler öz vatanımıza kayıtmaya, yıkılgan medeniyetimizi kaldırmaya, kıyıklemeye tek Gorbaçov'un perestroikasının sonraki yıllarında ve Sovyetler Birliği dağıldıktan sonra ise artık Ukrayna devletinin yardımından başladık.
Yeah.
Would you check once again this translation?
Do you hear what? Do you hear us with translation? I'm sorry. My proposition is, we have, yes, please, Rustam, can you come? I think I found a way how to go quick. It's great that we have Crimean Tatars. Crimean Tatars in our government. I think it's helpful. Будь ласка, собі оцей мікрофон. От, будь ласка. Ось той мікрофон. Ага. Давай, будь ласка. Ти ж можеш паралельно перекладати абзац.
Все, да.
Мустафа.
Sistemde. Şimdi.
Burada başka tercüme edersin. Ben şimdi
Okay.
Into English.
Sure.
Ти не вмикнув мікрофон.
Да, да.
Окей.
ben 1944 yılında halkın topyekun sürgününe ve soykırımına uğratılan ve ardından 20. yüzyılın en acımasız rejimine birine karşı vatanlarına kayıtıp gelmek ve insan hakları için neredeyse yarım asırlık bir devir içerisinde güreşken Kırım Tatar halkının az sayıdaki daha hayatta kalan temsilcilerinden birisiyim.
I'm one of the few still surviving representative of the generation of Crimean Tatars who survived the total deportation of genocide of their people in 1944 and then waged an almost half-century struggle against one of the most brutal regimes of the 20th century for the right to return to their homeland and their human rights.
Büyük kıyınlıkları yenip bizler öz vatanımıza kayıtmaya, yeniden medeniyetizme kalıntılarını teklemeye, tek Gorbaçov'un perestroika sonraki yıllarında ve Sovyetler Birliği dağıldıktan sonra ise artık Ukrayna'nın devletinin yardımına başladı.
Overcoming There is a translation.
No, please.
Yeah, overcoming enormous difficulties, we began to return to our homeland and restore the remnants of our destroyed culture only in the last years of Gorbachev's perestroika and after the collapse of the USSR, already with the support of the independent Ukrainian state.
Bu cereyan 2014 yılın senesi Şubat ayında bundan 70 yıl önce halkımıza karşı soykırım uygulanan devletin varisi yani Rusya Federasyonu askerleri Kırım'a hücum etmesinden tokatıldı.
This process was interrupted in February 2014 by the invasion of Crimea by troops of the state that is successor of the state that committed genocide against the indigenous people of Peninsula.
Ukrayna'nın ana topraklarına doğru daha fazla ilerlemek maksadıyla Rusya Kırım Yarımadası'nı hızla bir askeri platforma çevirmeye başladı. Ve Rus mantığına göre bu bazanın teritoriyasında yalnız işgalcilere sadık insanlar yaşamaları gerek olduğu sebebinden büyük baskılara birinci olarak Tamır halkı, Kırım Tatarları ve etnik Ukrayniler uğradılar.
This process was interrupted in February 2014 by the invasion of Crimea by troops of the state that is the successor of the state that committed genocide against the indigenous people of Peninsula. Russia began to rapidly transform the entire peninsula into a powerful military base with a clear goal of further expansion into the mainland Ukraine. And since in accordance with Russian logic, only people loyal to the occupiers were supposed to live in the territory of this base, then representatives of the indigenous people and ethnic Ukrainians were the first to be subjected to large-scale repressions.
Söz sırası işgalcilerin siyasi ve dini sebeplerle baskılarına ve cezalarına uğratılan, bu sırada kaçırılan ve öldürülen insanlar, tutuklanan, aramalar, soruşturmalar ve işkencelere uğratılan Kırım Tatarlarının sayısı nüfus oranlarına göre bütün Rusya'daki represyalara nispeten 52 kere ziyade olganı kaydetmek mümkündür.
It is enough to mention that the number of Crimean Tatars repressed for political or religious reasons, including kidnappings and murders, arbitrary arrests, searches, interrogations, torture, is proportionally 52 times higher than the number of repressions in Russia as a whole.
Çeşit kaynaklara göre işgal başlandıktan bugüne kadar artık 50 bine yakın Kırım Tatarları yani nüfusun tahminen %15'i ve 200 bine yakın etnik Ruslar Kırım'ı terk etmeye mecbur oldular. Bu zaman içerisinde ise Kırım'a göçürülen Rus vatandaşların sayısı artık 1 milyona adamdan ziyade.
According to various estimates, from the moment of occupation to the present, about 50,000 Crimean Tatars, about 15% of the entire population, and up to 200,000 ethnic Ukrainians have left Crimea, and the number of Russian citizens resettled in Crimea already exceeds 1 million people.
Kırım Tatarların öz vatanını terk etmesi devam etmektedir ve eğer Kırım işgalden kurtarılmasa yakın gelecekte o halkın bir millet olarak tamamıyla yeryüzünden yok olmasını beklemek mümkündür.
The process of displacing the indigenous people continues, and if Crimea is not liberated, then in the foreseeable future we can foresee that the complete disappearance of the Crimean Tatar people as an original ethnic group.
Yani tüm Ukrayna için Kırım'ın azat edilmesi birinci sırada devletin toprak bütünlüğünü sağlamak ve hafızlığını temin etmek meselesi olsa, Kırım Tatar halkı için bu bir millet olarak yeryüzünde kalmak veya tamamıyla yok olmak meselesidir.
Therefore, if for Ukraine in general the liberation of Crimea is primarily a question of restoring its territorial integrity and ensuring its security, then for the indigenous people of Crimea it is also a question of survival and further development or complete disappearance as an original nation.
Bugün Ukrayna saldırgan devlete karşı savaşta kendini, toprağını parçalamak, zalim işgalcilerin eline düşen milyonlarca vatandaşlarını kurtarmak için çok kan kaybetmektedir.
Today, Ukraine is bleeding, fighting off the aggressor, trying to liberate its occupied territories, to liberate millions of our fellow citizens who have fallen into the hands of cruel occupiers. We're grateful to all the countries in these difficult times for us to provide significant support and assistance to our country, clearly realizing that this war of Russia is not only against Ukraine, but also against the entire world order, against civilization.
Bununla beraber sonki zamanlarda bizleri çok rahatsızlayan bir şey şu ki bazı bizlere müttefik olan devletlerde sözde gerçek siyasi yani real politik teorisinin taraftarları hakim olmaya başladı. Malum olduğu gibi bu teoriye göre her devlet yalnız kendi ekonomik ve diğer bir menfaatlarını düşünecek ve bu menfaatlar uğrunda ise ahlaki ve manevi prensipler, insan hakları ve uluslararası hukuk hesaba alınması şart değilmiş.
However, we are concerned that in some of our allied states, the adherents of the so-called theory of real politics have begun to prevail. That is a theory that for the economic or the other interests of their countries allows them to ignore moral and ethical principles, human rights and international law.
Bu konsepte göre saldırgan devletinin planlarına çok uygun olan nasıldır barış anlaşmasını teklif etmek ve bu anlaşmaya göre Kırım Yarımadası'nda ve birçok diğer işgal altında olan Ukrayna topraklarını Rus toprakları olarak tanımaya hazır olduklarını bildirmek de mümkünmüş.
One can put forward a certain peace plan that largely coincides with the plans of the aggressor and provides for a ceasefire due to the recognition of Crimea and some other occupied territories of Ukraine as territories of Russia.
Şimdi tahmin ediniz ki bu gibi barış anlaşmalar, planlar Kırım'da diğer işgal altında olan ayrıca Rus FSB'sinin zindanlarında olan ve büyük umutlu Ukrayna devletine ve onun müttefiklerine bakıp duran vatandaşlarımız nasıl karşılayacak?
Now imagine what kind of impression such peace plans will make on our fellow citizens in Crimea and other occupied territories, especially those who are behind the dungeons of the FSB and look with the hope of their country and its allies.
Bundan da gayrı herkes farkında ki böyle barış yalnız daha kanlı savaş için kısa bir teneffüs olacak. Çünkü askeri güç kullanılması tehdidi altında imzalanan ve uluslararası hukukuna aykırı olan her türlü anlaşmalar geçersizdir.
In addition, it is absolutely clear to everyone that such a peace agreement will be a very short break before a new, even bloodier war, because any agreement signed under the threat of using military force and contradicting the norms of international law are legally null and void.
Yazık ki hep Putin'in rejimin tüm dünyasının onu günde yaptığı cinayetlere rağmen bizim bazı müttefiklerimiz de daha şunu anlamadılar. O kana susamış devletin, saldırgan devletin uluslararası hukuk kanununa, Birleşik Devletler'in teşkilatının temel prensiplerine aykırı olan tavizlerini vermekle, işgal ettiği diğer devletin topraklarına hediye etmekle onu susturmak mümkün değil. Ve bu böyle tavizler tüm dünya büyük tehlike yaratacaktır.
It is surprising that despite all the crimes of the Putin regime in the front of the whole world, some of our allies have not yet understood that appeasing of bloodthirsty aggressor through some territorial concessions to the detriment of the other countries and international law, to the detriment of the basic principles of the UN is impossible and is fraught with the grave consequences to all humanity.
Yeter ki 1930 yılını hatırlayın. Malum olduğu gibi o zaman Hitler'i memnun etmek için ve böylelikle barış sağlamak için Çekoslovakya'nın bazı toprakları hediye edilgeniydi. Ama neticede 2. Dünya başlandı. Hiç olmadıkta o savaşta 55 milyon fazla öldürülgen insanların hatırasına böyle hataları tekrarlamayın.
And that tactic is very reminiscent of the attempt to appease Hitler in 1938 by handing over part of the territory of Czechoslovakia to him, which resulted in World War II, at least in memory of more than 55 million people who died in that war. Perhaps such mistakes should not be repeated.
Kırım Platforması'nın zirvesinin sonuç açıklamasının projesinde bildiğiniz gibi bu artık 11 yıldan fazla devam etken savaşını yalnız uluslararası hukukun esasında tarafların toprak bütünlüğü sağlanması şartla durdurmak mümkün olduğunu kaydetmektedir. Ben bu resolution burada kabul edildiğinden sizlere samimi teşekkürlerimi bildirmek isterim. Ve böylelikle bizim bu toplantımız bu savaşına, bu kanlı savaşın durulmasına daha bir adım olacaktır. Dikkatiniz için sağ olun.
I hope that representatives of all countries will support the proposed text of the final declaration of the 5th Crimean Summit, which provides for the end of this bloody war that has lasted more than 11 years only under the conditions of compliance with the norms of international law, and first of all ensuring the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Thank you very much for your attention.
Çok sahi olunuz Mustafa'a. Special event, special translations, and probably yesterday President Trump was right, absolutely right, criticizing UN equipment. So let us now proceed with the statements of the distinguished participants of the summit. Let me once again remind about the time limit of 2 minutes. It is my pleasure to call upon His Excellency Mr. Željko Komšić, Chairman of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Be fast. President Zelensky, colleagues, head of states, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. President Zelensky, first of all, thank you for the invitation to participate in the 5th Summit of International Crimea Platform. As you noted in your letter, this is a symbolic year of 18th anniversary of the United Nations. But we should show that the United Nations is not a symbolic institution and that the Charter of the United Nations is not a symbolic document. It has never been more important as it now to show that we stand behind the elementary political achievements of the civilized society which the Charter of the United Nations has been representing for the past 8 decades. The International Crimea Platform is a platform based on multilateralism with the purpose to upholding the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, including Crimea and the city of Sevastopol. The Charter of the United Nations obliges us as a civilized societies to uphold these timeless, universal principles, as you rightly pointed out in the proposed declaration. Article 2 of the Charter clearly requires that the civilized states signatories to refrain from the threat or use or force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state or in any other manner inconsistent with the purpose of the United Nations, and to settle their international disputes by peaceful means. There cannot be fortune or blessing in taking away the land of other people, killing civilians, children, conducting ethnic cleansing or genocide for any political goal, national interest, or wars for the business profit, anywhere in the world. I fully support the proposed declaration, which reaffirms that no territorial acquisition resulting from the threat or use of force shall be recognized as legal across the world. Finally, coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina, which became a member of the United Nations despite the aggression, ethnic cleansing, and genocide we suffered, we reaffirm our commitment to the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its international recognized borders, extending to its territorial waters. Never lose hope. Good will always prevail over the forces of evil and destruction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And now I give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Alar Karis, President of the Republic of Estonia.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, President Zelensky, for the invitation to this summit. This year marks 85 years since the World's Declaration, when the United States took a principled stand by refusing to recognize the Soviet occupation of free sovereign Baltic states. That steadfast commitment to international law and justice gave hope to my nation and reaffirmed that the principles that aggression cannot erase sovereignty. The same principle must guide us today, as Russia wages its brutal war of aggression against Ukraine, occupying 1/5 of its territory and continued the illegal annexion of Crimea, we must remain unwavering in non-recognition, just as the free Baltic states of the world once stood firm for the Baltic nations. We condemn systematic human rights violations by Russia against civilians, including the indigenous people, Crimean Tatars, who suffer the most under the occupation of Crimea and the war of aggression against Ukraine, and who resist oppression while standing for independent media and information. Russian appointed courts have already convicted over 50 people this year for acts that the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights assessed as constituting legitimate exercises of freedom of expression. Guided by the spirit of the United Nations, we welcome the adoption of the New York Declaration and renew our collective resolve to achieve a just and lasting peace in Ukraine and across the globe. As our former president, Leonard Merry, once said, freedom is not something that can be taken for granted. It must be defended, nourished, and shared. Today, your fight for freedom is also our fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now I am pleased to welcome His Excellency Edgars Rinkēvičs, President of the Republic of Latvia.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, dear Mr. President, dear Volodymyr, dear friends of Ukraine, I think that we all recognize that Crimea is the symbol of Russian aggression. This is where the war started back in 2014. The war didn't start actually in 2022, it started in 2014. That was when Russia broke the international law by attacking Ukraine's territorial integrity and independence. The core idea of Crimea platform is to put to an end of the occupation of Crimea, to remind to everybody that Crimea is Ukraine. Latvia understands all too well the importance of not recognizing the annexation. We, along with our Lithuanian and Estonian friends, restored our independence and sovereignty after almost a half of century of the Russian occupation. But it was a very long journey, and I do not believe that Ukraine or Crimea deserve to wait that long. Today, we reconfirm our commitment to stand with Ukraine. We will not recognize the illegal annexation of Crimea, Sevastopol, or any other region of Ukraine. However, for the people who survived and live under occupation, legal international nuances offer little help. People await liberation. That's why the path to peace is through strength. We must sustain maximum pressure on Ukraine. We must continue unwavering support to Ukraine. And it is absolutely clear at this time that Russia does not want peace. There is no sign of willingness to end this war. That's why we need to work together, all of us, for just and lasting peace. Work towards meaningful negotiations. Ladies and gentlemen, Latvia firmly believes in a world where Ukraine is a whole and free. Its borders respected, people safe, and future self-determined. The principles of United Nations Charter must be respected and protected. I just want to, one more time, to say that Crimea is Ukraine and Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is my honor now to invite His Excellency Mr. Gitanas Nausėda, President of the Republic of Lithuania. President Nausėda has personally taken part in every Crimea platform summit since 2021. So, Mr. President, please proceed with your address.
Your Excellency, President of Ukraine, dear Volodymyr, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to address you at the 5th summit of the International Crimea Platform. And I find it highly symbolic that we return to the United Nations where President Zelensky first proposed this initiative back in 2020. Unfortunately, the brutal reality that has inspired our first gatherings has not changed for the better. On the contrary, we know very well that Crimean residents, especially the local Tatar population, face arbitrary detentions, politically motivated persecutions, and suppression of independent institutions. Even children are not safe from militaristic propaganda. The Ukrainian identity is being erased through language bans and forced assimilation. The situation is dire. Detainees are denied medical care, subjected to torture, and face inhuman treatment, including sex violation. Religious freedom are restricted, independent media dismantled, and the judiciary weaponized against dissent. Ladies and gentlemen, Lithuania will never recognize Russia's occupation and annexation of Crimea, Sevastopol, or any other Ukrainian territory. For us, Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity are not up for negotiations. Supporting Ukraine, we help it defend the core principles of the UN Charter, and we will not be silenced. Lithuania calls for the immediate release of all illegally detained Ukrainian citizens in Crimea, journalists, human rights defenders, and activists. We urge the international community to stand with these individuals and ensure their voices are heard. Meanwhile, we are witnessing Russia's reckless behavior. As it continues to reject ceasefire proposals, Ukraine's cities and people are being showered with drones and missiles. A comprehensive ceasefire must precede any meaningful negotiations. Neither is this the time to talk about the easing of sanctions. A weak international response to the occupation and illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014 enabled Russia's full-scale war in 2022. We must not get tired to support Ukraine. We will be standing with Ukraine until its ultimate victory. Thank you, and Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is my honor to call upon His Excellency Marcelo Rebelo de Souza, President of the Portuguese Republic.
Mr. Chairman, President Zelensky, Mr. Mustafa Zemirev, Excellencies, the illegal occupation of Crimea in 2014 marked the start of Russia's broader campaign of aggression and disregard for international law, the UN Charter and UN resolutions. We unequivocally condemn the occupation and fully support Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. We firmly reject any territorial acquisition by force. We also strongly condemn the persecution and arbitrary detention of political prisoners, journalists, human rights defenders, and civilians in occupied Crimea, Sevastopol, and other Ukrainian territories. We are deeply concerned by Russia's unlawful deportation and illegal adoption of Ukrainian children, a very grave violation of international law that must not be ignored. We are appalled at the growing environmental disaster caused by Russia's militarization of Crimea, the Sea of Azov, and the Black Sea. We call for the immediate release of all unlawfully detained civilians and the safe return of abducted children and other forcibly transferred individuals. We also urge Russia to fully comply with international humanitarian law, including through the establishment of secure humanitarian corridors for civilian protection and evacuation. Let me reaffirm our unwavering support for Ukraine, including through the provision of military assistance to enable Kyiv to defend its people, its land, its sovereignty, as well as sanctions against the Russian regime, now and whenever they are needed. We will support always and stand with Ukraine and Ukrainian people. Never accept the annexation of Crimea. Support the New York Declaration, and we'll do it so as long as Russia persists in the illegal occupation of Ukrainian territory and its systematic violation on international law. Crimea is Ukraine. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is my great honor to invite His Excellency Peter Pellegrini, President of the Slovak Republic.
Thank you very much, Mr. President Zelensky. Dear colleagues, let me firstly stress that Slovak Republic does not accept violations of international law or violent border changes. This is a stance we take in all international discussion. Our own history makes us particularly aware of this serious issue. Dear colleagues, as we mark 80 years of the United Nations, we recall its founding principles, principles meant to keep the world safe, just, and at peace. Unfortunately, in Europe, we witness every day that these principles are ignored. They are attempts to seize more territory and to redraw recognized borders by force. This has been taking place in Ukraine since 2014, with each day of illegal annexion of Crimea alongside human rights violations. It continues each day that Ukraine must defend its people and territory against the full-scale war. This fifth summit of the Crimea platform sent a clear message. The Charter was not made à la carte to adhere to principles that we like and ignore those that tighten our arms. A world without rules, where violence and force dictate the fates of others, is unacceptable. We send a strong message today that any violation of territorial integrity by force is intolerable. Mr. President Zelensky, dear colleagues, as Ukraine's neighbor, Slovakia sees the toll of the ongoing war. We hope the war in Ukraine ends quickly, bringing peace and stopping the destruction and loss of life. As your neighbor, we continue to support Ukraine in various ways, including also our joint talks between our two governments. The Crimea platform is not just a forum. It sends an important dual message to the people of Ukraine that they are not forgotten, and to the world that even in the face of aggression, international law and the UN Charter matter. To conclude, the passage of time will not turn wrong into right. Crimea is Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I am pleased to invite Her Excellency Mrs. Natasha Pirc-Musar, President of the Republic of Slovenia.
Thank you very much, dear Mr. President Zelensky, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for me to address you today. With our meeting, we are sending a clear signal that the territorial integrity of Ukraine remains high on the international agenda and a top priority for Slovenia as well. This year, as we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the United Nations founding, we are reminding of the enduring value of the UN Charter. Its purposes and principles remain the cornerstones of our international system, guiding us to peace, justice, and cooperation among nations. Yet, as the entire world can see, the ideals and commitments of the United Nations are under brutal attack. Unfortunately, some permanent member states of the Security Council are no exception to this crime against multilateralism. This aggression, Russian aggression, is not just an attack on Ukraine. It is a direct challenge to the principles of the UN Charter itself. And the UN Charter is not an abstract concept. It is the basis for peace and stability in the international community. We reaffirm that any territorial acquisition achieved through the threat of or use of force cannot be legally recognized. States cannot do whatever they want to other states just because they can. This fundamental principle of international law must be consistently upheld to preserve the credibility of the entire multilateral system. We therefore once again call on the Russian Federation to immediately, completely and unconditionally withdraw its entire armed forces from the territory of Ukraine and to cease its hostilities against civilians and civilian infrastructure. Excellencies, the resolutions adopted by the United Nations General Assembly since 2014 have sent a clear message. The international community will not accept the illegal attempts to redraw borders by force. However, as long as these resolutions are not implemented, it is our responsibility to continue to raise our voices, act and strengthen our joint efforts in defense of international law. In this context, Slovenia welcomes the adoption of the New York Declaration, which reaffirms our common commitment to the UN Charter and to a rules-based international order. Let me conclude by emphasizing that our goal is not only to stop the aggression, our shared responsibility is also to work towards a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, a peace that respects Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity and restores confidence in multilateralism and the United Nations itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the honor to invite His Serene Highness Alois, Hereditary Prince of the Principality of Liechtenstein, to deliver his remarks, please.
Mr. President Zelensky, Excellencies, today we have the opportunity not only to send a strong message of unity to Ukraine, but also to reaffirm our collective commitment to uphold the UN Charter consistently and to ensure peace and justice for all. Excellencies, it was the international community's half-hearted response to Russia's invasion of Crimea in 2014 that created the conditions for the full-scale invasion of 2022. Liechtenstein has condemned the illegal annexation of Crimea and of other illegally occupied territories of Ukraine. We have also underscored that we will not recognize and accept these illegal annexations. The territorial integrity of Ukraine must not be up for debate. We have witnessed a dangerous erosion with respect to the legality of the use of force. In standing up for the territorial integrity of Ukraine, we are also making an essential statement to support these rules governing the use of force. The political leadership of the Russian Federation continues to lack the political willingness to engage in genuine peace talks. Liechtenstein continues to support a ceasefire and a just peace for Ukraine as outlined by the General Assembly. Excellencies, it is more urgent than ever to uphold perpetrators of the crime of aggression accountable. The agreement between the Council of Europe and Ukraine on the Special Tribunal on the crime of aggression sends an important signal in this respect, while a significant accountability gap remains unaddressed. Excellencies, we have a choice to make. Ukraine is unlikely to be the last state to be threatened by would-be aggressors. We should not resign ourselves to a more militarized world where the use of force is accepted as a commonplace. Much rather, this is the moment to commit to the rule of law and to enforce the rules governing the use of force enshrined in the UN Charter. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Serene Highness. And I am pleased to invite His Excellency Dick Schoof, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Netherlands.
Thank you, colleagues. Dear President Zelensky, dear Volodymyr, thank you for the invitation to take part in this meeting. It's an honor for me to attend the 5th Summit of the International Crimea Platform. Today's panel discussions will highlight some of the most pressing issues facing Ukraine. On behalf of the Netherlands, I would like to reiterate our stance on the crucial importance of restoring Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. In fact, I can be brief on this point. The illegal occupation and annexation of Ukrainian territories is unacceptable. The New York Declaration is very clear on this point, and we fully support it. One of those territories is Crimea. Crimea has been under illegal Russian occupation since March 2014 and has become a grim example of how Russian aggression and occupation affect people's daily lives. Many of Crimea's inhabitants were forced to flee to other parts of the country, leaving their homes, relatives and roots behind. For those who were not in a position to leave, the occupation is becoming more and more oppressive. Russia's attempt to forcibly and systematically erase Ukrainian identity in Crimea involves historical heritage being destroyed, human rights being violated, and freedom and democracy being ravaged. It's absolutely crucial that those responsible for such grave human rights violations are held to account. This is why the Netherlands uses every opportunity it has to underline the importance of restoring human rights, the rule of law and democracy for the people of Crimea and all Ukrainians living under Russian occupation. Indeed, this is important for all of us, all around the world. A few weeks ago, it was Independence Day in Ukraine. One day, all religions of Ukraine will be able once again to celebrate its freedom and independence under peaceful conditions. But this will not happen by itself. It is up to all of us to do our utmost to make this possible, to stop Russia's war and to make sure that aggression is never rewarded. And I'm impressed by all those brave Ukrainian men and women who are fighting tirelessly to make this happen. Rest assured that the Netherlands is committed to supporting Ukraine until a sustainable, just and lasting peace is reached. This was the message by the Benelux yesterday, spoken by Frieden, the Prime Minister of Luxembourg. It is my message today, and it will be my message tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you, Vladimir.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. It is my honor to give the floor to His Excellency Xavier Espot Zamora, Head of Government of the Principality of Andorra, please.
Zelensky, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to represent the government of the Principality of Andorra at this important dialogue forum, which is committed to working towards a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. Against the backdrop of Russia's ongoing war of aggression against Ukraine, which is a blatant breach of international law, resilience emerges as a vital force in the pursuit of peace, recovery, and justice. After more than 1,300 days of death and destruction, this war must come to an end. The Principality of Andorra reaffirms its complete and absolute support for Ukraine. Russia's war of aggression continues to cause unimaginable suffering, and the international community must remain united and determined in its condemnation. The Andorran government has aligned itself with European Union policy and implemented financial sanctions against Russia and Belarus. Andorra calls for the full respect of international law and the principles inscribed in the United Nations Charter. We reaffirm our support for Ukrainians' independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. My country has welcomed Ukrainians fleeing the horrors of war, guaranteeing nearly 400 temporary residence permits in a country with 80,000 inhabitants, and ensuring access to education, healthcare, and the labor market. These measures demonstrate our determination to alleviate of human suffering and protect of human rights and fundamental freedoms within our means. Recent events have made it increasingly clear that this war is not only an attack on the Ukrainian people, but also an assault on human rights and international law. We are deeply concerned about the immediate and long-term humanitarian consequences of the war, particularly its devastating impact on women and other vulnerable groups, including children. Excellencies, the Principality of Andorra will continue to stand with Ukraine, working alongside the international community to ensure accountability, justice, and peace. Ukraine's struggle is about defending the shared values that bind us together as an international community. For this reason, Andorra reaffirms its support for the New York Declaration within the framework of this meeting. Thank you for your attention.
Yes. Thank you, Your Excellency. Now, with a great pleasure, I turn to His Excellency, Mr. Bart de Wever, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Belgium.
Thank you. Today's summit and the impressive presence of the international community is an expression of the highest level of our unwavering support to Ukraine, to its leadership and to its brave people who have been forced by a brutal aggressor to wage an existential struggle for their survival. But we should also not forget that the war in Ukraine and our joint endeavor to defend the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine also includes the first region of your country that became a victim of present-day Russian expansionism, and that is the Crimea. We have worked successfully to put the issue of the illegal annexation of Crimea by Russia and the situation in the peninsula on the agenda of the international community whenever we could and on all possible fora. This job is far from finished. The persecution of the dissident voices in Crimea and the violation of the basic human rights of the Crimean Tatar community and of its leaders and activists continues unabatedly. When I visited Ukraine, I had the chance to talk to Crimean victims of the Russian occupation, and their tales were horrifying. I met a young boy who was forced to join the Russian Navy, and in the training camp he had dared to put down the Russian flag and replace it by his underwear. And I stood speechless at the bravery of that young boy. And that's why I'm proud to be here today, not only to confirm our principled position that Crimea is an unalienable part of Ukraine under the international law, but also to confirm our respect and support to all citizens in the peninsula who courageously stand up for their opinions and for their fights for those of their community. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And I am very pleased to invite His Excellency John Antonio Briceño, Prime Minister of Belize.
Thank you very much, Excellency. President Zelensky, Belize recognizes your bravery and stands by you and your people. I wish to reaffirm Belize's firm commitment to Ukraine and that Crimea must be allowed to be where it rightfully belongs, with Ukraine. We attach high regard to the rule of law and to the peaceful settlement of disputes. As testament to this conviction, my country, together with Guatemala, has submitted our territorial dispute to the International Court of Justice for a final peaceful and just resolution. In an international climate where multilateralism has been made fragile, it is important that small states support one another to ensure foundational principles and values are upheld. Belize has participated in the Crimea platform before as a symbol of solidarity. Belize values every country with which it has established bilateral relations. Belize is also pleased to announce that we support the New York Declaration. Belize and Ukraine's bilateral relationship should work to advance new avenues, intertwining diplomatic support with trade and people-to-people cultural ties. May God continue to bless the people of Ukraine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. And I kindly invite His Excellency Prime Minister of the Republic of Bulgaria, Rosen Zhelyakov, to deliver his address.
Thank you. Dear President Zelensky, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. As absurd as it may seem, we are now into the 4th year of Russia's unfair, lawful, unjust and unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine. Russia's full-scale invasion began February 22, but the aggression started 11 years earlier with the illegal occupation of Crimea, the event that triggered a wave of military escalation that continues to this day. The annexation of Crimea constitutes a brutal violation of international law, including the UN Charter. As sovereign states, we have a duty to condemn and reject actions that undermine the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. Bulgaria's commitment to the non-recognition of Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea, Sevastopol and part of Donetsk, Kherson, Lugansk and Zaporozhye remains firm. These regions are and will remain part of Ukraine. Honourable colleagues, we strongly condemn the forced displacement and deportation of Ukrainian children to the Russian Federation, where they are subject to re-education and stripped of their identity. We call for full access for international human rights monitors to occupied areas. Accountability for all violations must be ensured. Crimea was once a sunny resort on the Black Sea, but the Russian occupation has turned into a launch pad for missile and drone attacks in southern Ukraine, effectively a battleground. We want to see Crimea as a place for recreation, not war. We urge the Russian Federation to commit to the diplomatic process led by the President of the United States, but sadly Russia will still believes in bloodshed, not peace. A peace deal must not result in a frozen conflict or territorial concessions which would embolden future aggression. It must include credible security guarantees for Ukraine and consider the interests of both Ukraine and Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. And it is my honor to invite His Excellency Prime Minister of Cabo Verde, Mr. Ulises Correa e Silva, to take the floor. We are truly delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, President Zelensky, for inviting us for this important platform. President Zelensky, we consider this meeting important as we see it as a way to find more sustainable and lasting solution to the war in your country, Ukraine. The government of Cabo Verde, since February 2022, had a firm position regarding this conflict. We didn't change our position. We maintain our position on the right side of the history. Cabo Verde is a country that respects international law. International law for all, for all, for all. We maintain that respect for territorial integrity is a fundamental principle and sine qua non condition for peaceful relations between countries, between states, and therefore for international peace and security. Dialogue, peaceful settlement and of conflicts and cooperation must prevail. International law, international rules-based order shall not undermine as the international community is striving to ensure a peaceful world. I thank you for your kind attention. God bless Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Our next speaker is Taoiseach of Ireland, His Excellency, Mr. Micheál Martin.
Thank you, President Zelensky, Excellencies and friends. It's over 3 years since the launch of Russia's full-scale, unprovoked and unjustified war of aggression against Ukraine. It's 11 years since this aggression began in Crimea with Russia's illegal annexation. Russia could and should end its brutal war at this moment. All it has to do is halt its attacks, accept an unconditional ceasefire and come to the negotiating table. But it chooses not to do so and instead intensifies its air attacks against Ukraine's towns and cities, deliberately targeting civilians and essential infrastructure. These are not the actions of a country seeking peace. Mr. President, you and the people of Ukraine have Ireland's full support as you stand against this brutal Russian aggression. We cannot allow force to be the means by which international borders are defined. We cannot return to a world where we accept that might is right. I hope that we have learned the painful lessons of history not to allow this to happen. The international community must stand firm in our refusal to recognise the legitimacy of Russia's actions. When a state transgresses international law, as we have seen with Russia's annexation of Crimea and its illegal full-scale war against Ukraine, it threatens not only the immediate victims and those on the front line, but also unravels the fabric that binds our global community. Ukraine is a sovereign, independent nation and a full member of these United Nations. Like each one of us here, it must be afforded the fundamental right to peace and security and full respect for its internationally recognised borders. Justice is not just a matter of principle, but rather it forms the very foundations from which we must build a comprehensive, just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Any peace agreement must uphold Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity based on respect for the principles of the UN Charter and for international law. And this includes continued recognition that Russia's violation of these principles in Ukraine began not in 2022, but in 2014. I am deeply concerned about the reports of human rights abuses in Russian-occupied Crimea and in all the Ukrainian territories illegally held by Russia. Russian efforts to change the demographic composition of the peninsula, its attack on the Ukrainian language, culture and identity, and its callous suppression of the Crimean Tatar community must be strongly condemned. Ireland welcomes and supports the New York Declaration, and I use this opportunity again to reiterate Ireland's firm condemnation of the Russian Federation's continued aggression against Ukraine. We salute you, President Zelensky, and your government for your leadership, resilience and courage. It continues to inspire. Ireland and the European Union will always stand with the Ukrainian people for as long as it takes. Slava Ukraini.
Thanks a lot, Your Excellency. It's my honor to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Luc Frieden, Prime Minister of Luxembourg.
Mr. President, dear Volodymyr, dear friends, 11 years of Crimea's occupation by Russia, 11 years of oppression, of systemic human rights violations and suffering. We, the international community, must resolutely continue to reject this act of blatant aggression. This is, and this remains, a direct assault on the principles that keep our world together: sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the inviolability of borders. That is why this platform matters. It gives us unity, it gives us a voice, it keeps Russia accountable. Luxembourg is proud to support this work, and we know what is at stake. As a country invited twice in the last century, we will never accept a world where force dictates law. It was here in America that one of my predecessors, Prime Minister in exile, asked for the support of the US and international community to give us back our independence. We succeeded only because we were not alone. And today, this room shows you, Mr. President, dear Volodymyr, that you do not stand alone in this fight. Since 2014, the United Nations General Assembly has spoken with clarity and conviction. The Charter must be upheld. Respect for the UN Charter is not a matter of choice. It is a very foundation of peace, prosperity and security. Russia's action show contempt for international law and humanitarian principles. Borders cannot and must not be redrawn by force. And therefore, let me once again pay tribute to the Ukrainian people, your courage, your resilience, your determination. You are not only defending your land, you are defending the values we share. You continue to inspire us. Luxembourg stands firmly with Ukraine. Your fight for freedom is our fight too. And we will remain by your side until peace, full sovereignty, and justice prevails. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Our next speaker is the Prime Minister of the Republic of Malta, His Excellency, Mr. Robert Abella. Please.
President Zelensky, dear Volodymyr, Excellencies, friends, Crimea is Ukraine. 11 years since its forced annexation, the Russian Federation continues to assert its illegitimate occupation of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol in violation of Article 2, Sub-Article 4 of the UN Charter. Together with our international partners present in today's summit, and I thank you for that, Malta and the EU will continue to affirm our unwavering support for the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. The restoration of the territorial integrity of Ukraine will be a crucial step for the restoration of a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace for Ukraine. The face of Russia's unjustified presence inside the Crimean Peninsula, Malta maintains its unwavering support for the Ukrainian residents and during occupation by Russian de facto authorities. We take this occasion to condemn Russia's attempts to change, or even worse, erase Ukraine's national identity and way of life via the forced imposition of Russian citizenship. By applying military suppression and intimidation, the Russian Federation is aiming to permanently alter the Crimean Peninsula's demographic structures, further to those in Ukraine's other Russian-occupied territories. Mr. President, as we speak, Russian occupying authorities inside Crimea continue to impose harsh bans on the Ukrainian language, traditions, as well as holidays to this day. Sadly, we understand that such restrictive measures are ultimately paving the way towards a militarized policy of Russification, one which ultimately erases the indigenous and folkloric voices of the Ukrainian people inside this region. Regretfully, this complements the Russian Federation's unlawful deportation as well as the forced transfer of Ukrainian children from Crimea, resulting in changes to the identity and citizenship of Ukrainian children. In Malta's current role as President of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe, we have and will continue to place specific attention to children impacted by Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, and will continue to advocate for the immediate return of forcibly displaced Ukrainian children to their respective homelands, including Crimea. To conclude, we believe that Russia's actions mark a stark violation of the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence of states as boldly enshrined in the UN Charter. In adopting the summit's New York Declaration, we therefore reaffirm that the right for reintegration of the Crimean Peninsula as part of Ukraine is non-negotiable. Without any further delay, Malta calls on the Russian Federation to immediately reverse its illegal occupation of Crimea, together with the other 4 Russian annexed territories. Slava Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. And I am very pleased to invite His Excellency Mr. Yaşar Güler, Minister of National Defense of the Republic of Turkey. Buyurun.
Thank you. Esteemed President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zeleensky, Honorable National Leader of the Crimean Tatars and members of the Ukrainian Parliament, Mr. Mustafa Kerimoglu, distinguished heads of states and government, dear Crimean Tatar brothers and sisters. It is an honor to be with you today at this summit on the 18th anniversary of the United Nations, once again highlighting the Crimean cause. For us, the peaceful resolution of Crimea is not inseparable from the quest for a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. The Crimean Tatars have long been an integral part of Ukraine's diverse fabric, and they contributed to peace and stability. Turkey has never recognized the illegal annexation of Crimea, and we have stood firm since 2014, supporting Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, including Crimea. Defending the rights of the Crimean Tatars is not only a matter of foreign policy, but a historical and moral duty for us. We will continue our relentless pursuit to amplify their voices, protect their rights, and ensure their freedom and dignity. It is encouraging to see Ukraine safeguarding the rights of our Tatar brothers and sisters. We will continue to support President Zelensky's commitment to the Crimean cause. Turkey will continue its efforts towards this end. In closing, I would like to reaffirm Turkey's commitment to the Crimean platform and express our hope to advance not only the Crimean cause, but also the enduring interests of independent, prosperous, and sovereign Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ministers. Dear Excellencies, dear colleagues, allow me at this moment to thank His Excellency President Zelensky for his participation in the 5th Crimean platform. Dear colleagues, I am very pleased to invite Her Excellency Ms. Alina Valtonen, Chairperson in Office of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Minister of Finland.
Excellencies, I have the privilege to speak today both as the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Finland and as the Chairperson in Office of the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. The OSCE core principles and commitments stemming from the Helsinki Final Act mirror the central tenets of the UN Charter. They include the respect for sovereign equality, territorial integrity, the inviolability of borders, the non-intervention in internal affairs, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. These principles remain as vital as ever, despite Russia's war of aggression that blatantly violates them. Justice is a key component of sustainable peace. The OSCE contributed significantly to documenting Russia's violations of international law with a focus on deported Ukrainian children, arbitrarily detained civilians and prisoners of war. I am acutely concerned about the dire human rights situation of Crimean Tatars and Ukrainians living on Crimean Peninsula. It has been more than 11 years since the Russian occupation began. Today we reiterate that Crimea is Ukraine and the city of Sevastopol is Ukraine. The territorial integrity of Ukraine must be restored. There is no place for imperialism in the 21st century. We remain committed to the UN Charter and the Helsinki principles and unwavering in our support to Ukraine and its people. Glory to Ukraine.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Now I am honored to invite His Excellency, Mr. Takeshi Iwaya, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Japan, who will deliver the message on behalf of the Prime Minister of Japan.
Thank you, Minister Shibiha. Today, I'd like to deliver the statement of Prime Minister of Japan, Mr. Ishiba, on his behalf. 3.5 years have passed since the beginning of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. We renew our respect for the day-to-day effort of the Ukrainian people to defend their country and freedom. The host of this meeting, President Zelensky, encourages Ukrainian people every day and night who endure tension and anxiety and fight for their own future. A president bravely makes every single effort toward peace in homeland. We would like to express our utmost respect for him. Japan supports the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, including Crimea. We are deeply concerned about the suffering of those who were displaced from their home, including Crimea. Through today's meeting, we reaffirm to the international community the principle that unilateral change of the status quo by force is unacceptable. Russia continues its brutal attacks, showing no signs of concrete steps toward peace. Now is the time for us to stand united together to draw a swift and positive response from Russia that leads to a just and lasting peace. We welcome President Trump's strong leadership and his tireless diplomatic effort in pursuit of this vital goal. The intensive discussions on security guarantees for Ukraine, mainly led by European countries, are very important for achieving peace. Japan is determined to actively participate in these discussions and to play an appropriate role in bringing peace to Ukraine.
From this viewpoint, Japan is in coordination with the international community to support Ukraine and to put sanctions against Russia. On September the 12th, we announced additional sanctions against Russia. We will continue our unwavering support for Ukraine and promote our effort for recovery and reconstruction through public-private partnership to strengthen social and economic resilience of Ukraine, to move closer to achieving two goals, which are an early ceasefire and a just and lasting peace. Japan will closely work with all countries present today. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and I am very pleased to invite the last speaker, Her Excellency Minister Ms. Maria Malmer-Stenengard.
Dear Ukrainian friends, friends of Ukraine, allow me to briefly make 2 points. First, Russia is the aggressor, and aggression must never be rewarded. Crimea is Ukraine, as are Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia. Respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity is not optional. Disregarding the rules and principles enshrined in the UN Charter would not only risk renewed aggression against Ukraine, but would also set a dangerous precedent. Moreover, we owe this to the Ukrainians on the temporarily occupied areas and to those who bravely fight for their freedom. Second, justice will prevail. We are firmly committed to ensuring full accountability for the countless crimes and human rights violations. 11 years after the illegal annexation of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol, and almost 4 years into the full-scale invasion, independent reports have documented large-scale violations of international law. These include extrajudicial killings, arbitrary arrests, torture, unlawful deportations, and forcible transfer of children, forced mobilization of Ukrainian civilians into Russia's armed forces, politically motivated prosecutions, and repression of ethnic and religious groups, in particular Crimean Tatars. Accountability is key for justice to the victims and a deterrent against future violations. In this context, we welcome the steps taken towards establishing a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. Before ending, I would like to underline that since Russia shows no interest in peace, as shown by the continuous attacks on civilians, we must keep maximizing our pressure on Russia and support for Ukraine in its legitimate pursuit of a just and lasting peace. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Dear friends, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, dear friends, as we close this summit, I thank all those who joined us today despite the demanding schedule of this week. This format was created by President Zelensky in 2021, yet it has proven to be as relevant as ever. Every year, the number of its participants keeps growing. This means that the issue of Crimea and the principle of territorial integrity remains critical for nations all over the world. On behalf of Ukraine, I thank every nation that stands with us, every nation that shares the ultimate goal of restoring a comprehensive, just and lasting peace grounded in the Charter of the United Nations. For Ukraine, as a founding member of the UN, the Charter is not simply a document, it is the cornerstone of the international law. Restoring Ukraine's territorial integrity is essential to restoring the authority of the Charter. International law shall prevail. Peace must be restored and secured, and this is only possible through strength. I now officially declare the 5th summit of the International Crimea Platform closed. Our work must go further. Today, the entire international order can be expressed in 3 words. Crimea is Ukraine. These words make a difference. And most importantly, as I said in the beginning, this summit sends a signal of hope to Ukrainians and Crimean Tatars in Crimea. The world did not forget, Ukraine did not forget, and we will never abandon you and our goal of restoring justice. I thank everyone present for standing with Ukraine and international law. Thank you for your attention.